The polished glass doors of Central Valley Bank shuddered as Robert Jefferson stumbled onto the sidewalk. His weathered hands gripped a wooden cane for balance as two stern-faced security guards flanked him. The bustling street outside momentarily drowned out the humiliation that burned in his chest, but the ache of being cast aside lingered. His well-worn leather shoes scraped against the pavement, the scuffing sound punctuating his every reluctant step. Inside the bank, whispers filled the space. Customers who had witnessed the spectacle exchanged uneasy glances. A young mother shielded her child's eyes as Robert's cane clattered against the doorframe. "This isn't right," an elderly woman muttered under her breath, clutching her handbag tightly. Others simply looked away, unwilling to meet his pleading gaze. "Sir, we've explained this to you multiple times, no exceptions," snapped the teller from behind her desk, her tone sharp enough to silence even the faint hum of the air conditioning. Robert turned back, desperation etched into his deeply lined face. "Please, I've been banking here for decades. Mrs. Blake, she always knew me. She helped me every month." His frail hands trembled as he fumbled with a stack of documents: a utility bill, his veteran's card, and a crumpled Social Security letter. They slipped from his grasp and fluttered to the floor like autumn leaves caught in the wind. He stooped to retrieve them, but his stiff joints made the effort slow and painful. The taller guard sighed impatiently, shaking his head. "Sir, we're asking you to leave. You're causing a disturbance." Robert's voice cracked as he straightened, his knees barely supporting him. "It's for my wife. She needs her medication. The pharmacy closes in less than 2 hours. I just need to access my pension. It's my money." The bank teller rolled her eyes and turned away, leaving the guards to handle him. One of them stepped forward, gripping Robert's elbow. "Let's go," he said firmly, guiding him toward the exit. Through the bank's tall windows, pedestrians slowed their pace to watch. Some pulled out their phones to record the scene. Outside, the bustling sounds of the city seemed indifferent to Robert's quiet humiliation. A few scattered papers, medical prescriptions, bank statements, and a worn photograph of a younger Robert in his army uniform lay discarded near the bench where the guards had left him. Robert slumped onto the bench, his shoulders sagging under the weight of decades of hard work, loyalty, and trust that had just been discarded like yesterday's trash. The world around him blurred as tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them away. Even in his despair, a lifetime of coaching had ingrained in him a sense of dignity. He wasn't ready to give up yet. As Robert sat there, gripping his cane and staring at the scattered remnants of his pride, a sleek black SUV pulled into the bank's parking lot. Nate Carter, a retired football legend and a beloved community leader, stepped out, his 6'5" frame cutting an imposing figure. Beside him was his 16-year-old daughter, Alana, her curious eyes taking in everything around them. "Dad, look," Alana said, pointing to Robert. "That man looks upset." Nate turned, his sharp gaze falling on the elderly man hunched on the bench. Something about the scene struck a chord deep within him. The sight of Robert's trembling hands and the papers strewn at his feet painted a picture of quiet desperation that Nate couldn't ignore. "Sir, are you okay?" Nate asked, his deep voice laced with concern as he approached. Robert looked up, startled. For a moment he hesitated, unsure if he should speak, but something about Nate's presence, a blend of authority and kindness, encouraged him to open up. "My wife, Margaret," Robert began, his voice wavering. "She's sick. Cancer. Her medication costs nearly $500, and the pharmacy closes at 5. I've been banking here for over 40 years, but they won't let me access my account because I don't have a smartphone. They said I need to update my ID digitally, but I don't know how." As he spoke, Alana crouched down to gather the papers at his feet. Her eyes widened as she picked up a photograph. A younger Robert standing on the sidelines of a basketball court, surrounded by a group of teenagers holding a championship trophy. "Dad, look at this," she said, showing Nate the picture. "It's Coach Jefferson. They were talking about him at school last week." Recognition dawned on Nate's face. He had heard stories of Robert Jefferson, the local coach who had dedicated decades to mentoring young athletes. He had helped countless kids get off the streets and into college programs, often paying out of pocket for equipment and uniforms. Nate realized that this was no ordinary man. This was a community hero, now cast aside by the very system he had supported all his life. "Coach Jefferson," Nate said, crouching to meet Robert's gaze, "you've done so much for others. Now it's our turn to help you." The three of them walked back into the bank together, Robert leaning heavily on Nate for support. As they entered, the lively chatter of the lobby fell silent. Customers turned to watch, their phones discreetly capturing the unexpected scene. Rachel Spencer, the bank's manager, stepped out of her office, her eyes narrowing as she recognized Robert. "Mr. Jefferson," she began. Her tone clipped. "We've already explained—" Nate interrupted, his deep voice cutting through the room like a referee's whistle. "Miss, I think you and I need to have a conversation about what banking really means." Rachel froze, taken aback by the commanding presence of the retired athlete. She straightened her blazer, trying to regain her composure. "Mr. Carter," she said carefully, "this matter concerns bank policy. We're simply following federal regulations regarding digital ID verification." "And what about basic human decency?" Nate countered, stepping closer. "This man has been banking here longer than you've been alive. He's never missed a payment, never overdrafted, and now you're telling me he can't access his own money because of a smartphone app?" Rachel's tablet trembled slightly in her hands as she glanced at the growing crowd outside. The pressure was mounting, and the cameras were rolling. "Mr. Carter, I understand your concern, but—" "Do you?" Nate interrupted again. "Because, from where I'm standing, it looks like this bank has forgotten what it means to serve its community." As Nate continued to advocate for Robert, Alana filmed the interaction, her teenage determination fueling her resolve to make sure the world saw what was happening. She zoomed in on the stark contrast between Robert's worn passbook and Nate's modern smartphone, a visual metaphor for the growing divide between technological progress and human compassion. By now, even the employees had gathered to watch. The tension in the room was palpable as Rachel struggled to find a response. Finally, she sighed, defeated. "Let's process his withdrawal," she said quietly. "We'll use the emergency override." Minutes later, Robert clutched the envelope containing his funds. Tears streamed down his face as he turned to Nate, his voice trembling with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you. Margaret, she's all I have left." Nate placed a reassuring hand on Robert's shoulder. "You've spent your life giving to others, Coach. Now it's time for us to give back." Outside, the crowd erupted into applause as Nate and Robert emerged. Alana uploaded the video to social media, and within hours it went viral, sparking a national conversation about the human cost of impersonal corporate policies. "Sometimes the biggest plays happen off the field," Nate told reporters later that evening. "Let's not forget to look out for one another." What would you do if you saw someone denied access to their own money? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories.